And I heard, as it were, the noise of thunder. One of the four beasts saying, "Come and see." And I saw, and behold, a white horse.
Hey folks, welcome back to Welcome to My World. It's Dominique back here with you. And as you can probably tell, I used that awesome, by the way, just iconic Johnny Cash song as a somewhat tongue-in-cheek representation of what some folks think paganism is. So I've had a lot of reader and viewer and listener questions, as well as some questions from folks locally who I know who, wonder what paganism is and what does it mean? Do you worship the devil? Do you sacrifice animals? What is paganism? And so I want to address that. I've written about my experience, I guess you would say, as a pagan for, at least a decade. And I'm pretty much just kind of a solitary pagan. I go to the Unitarian Church. I am a Unitarian Universalist. I don't subscribe to any particular doctrine, but I definitely appreciate that they, use wisdom from different religions and different modes of belief throughout the world. And they definitely incorporate a lot of pagan celebrations and information and that sort of thing into their doctrine, into their mode of belief. And so you will probably see me at local UU churches now and again. The Crystal Lake one is great, the Elgin one is great, and the Door County one is awesome. So there are a lot of pagans out there, and there are a lot of us that do go to the UU churches for various events, and because they are, pretty pagan friendly. So first, I want to answer some questions. Now, some of these, as you will probably be able to tell, have been asked in like a tongue-in-cheek way. I'm sure people really don't think that we worship the devil and sacrifice animals, but I'm going to go ahead and answer those questions as if people are actually wondering, because who knows, maybe there are folks out there who think that that's a thing. So as far as whether, pagans or any group of folks under the umbrella term of paganism, Wicca, Druidism, there are lots of things under the pagan umbrella. I really don't kind of specialize. I've taken part in Wiccan celebrations and just general pagan celebrations, and I've hung out with some, Druids and people from the Temple of the Four Winds and, various people who believe different things and basically just practice in different ways. And for those who are wondering, the distinctions that are made under the umbrella of paganism, like Wicca, like Druidism, like all of these sorts of things, are really, more than anything, they're not so much about belief, they're about how we practice, and they're about, what paganism means to us, and they're about just what we do to celebrate the different Sabbats and the different Esbats and that sort of thing, and how we actually go about doing that. So first and foremost, getting to those questions, do we worship the devil? Well, no, we don't worship anything or anyone. I would say personally, and some folks might disagree with me, but I've done quite a bit of scholarly research into paganism, and I'm a history buff, and I minored in philosophy when I went to school for psychology, so I happen to know that at least historically speaking, paganism is not or was not a religion. I do believe that pagans today deserve religious freedom and protection because it is definitely I guess you would say a spiritual belief, but more than anything, it's a practice that is similar in some ways to various religious practices throughout the world. So I do believe that we deserve religious protection and religious freedom. But I don't believe that paganism is a religion. And historically, the information out there would support my take on the matter. Okay. So feel free to disagree with me. I'd love to hear your arguments, but please keep it respectful. As I respect what you believe, I'd really like to ask that you try to respect what I believe. Okay. Now, I also happen to think that we all need to represent ourselves in a factual way and respect facts. I really think that's very important in anything in life that you might be doing. I think that's very important. So, factually speaking, no, it really isn't a religion. And as far as devil worship and sacrificing animals, well, we're not religious. We're certainly not Christian. We're not into any religious ideology, so we don't believe in the devil or Satan or what have you. I'll explain a little bit about paganism shortly. We believe essentially in representations of the various archetypes related to the human condition. So the various personalities and states of being psychologically are what we believe in. And that's what we honor through our practices. We honor the various parts of the human personality, the human condition, and that is why we have what the ancients would have called goddesses and gods. That's why we honor, the goddess, the female side of the human condition, the god, the male portion of the human condition. We believe in duality in all things. We believe that within darkness there is light, within light there is darkness, within death there is life, within life there is death. So we believe in duality. We believe essentially in balance in all things. And no matter what branch of paganism you might be in, and that may change for you over time as a pagan, we're essentially really into balance. We are not people who worship one deity. In fact, many of us believe that these so-called gods and goddesses, we don't believe that they're out there in the sky. I mean, I guess they might be. I don't know everything. I certainly don't have all of the information there is about the universe, nor does anybody. But so I guess anything is possible. But characteristically, we don't believe that there are physical, sky gods and goddesses out there. We believe that the god and the goddess and the various gods and goddesses represented in different pantheons throughout history, throughout the world, are, as I mentioned, representations of the human condition and of the spectrum of human personality, right? So we're not saying that there are creatures out there that are going to be throwing lightning bolts your way or, making you fall in love, or that Cupid's flying around with his bow and arrow. We don't believe that. What we believe is that there's wisdom in the way that the ancients worshipped and in the way that they viewed life. They expressed these really amazing concepts of what it means to be masculine, what it means to be feminine, what it means to be a human being, what it means to live life in such an eloquent way that just transcends words. And when they didn't have words to adequately represent these things, they came up with these beautiful transcendental concepts like the god and the goddess, like Athena and Aphrodite and Zeus and Ares and Hades and Poseidon, and these are representative of the various personalities and the various states of being present throughout the human condition. So no, we don't believe necessarily that there are, beings out there that are going to come, I don't know, strike you down or give you lots of money or whatever. What we do in worshiping and appreciating these gods and goddesses is celebrate the human condition and acknowledge the various aspects of the human condition. Okay, so that is one way that paganism really differs from other modes of belief throughout the world. That is one way that paganism differs. So as far as, like I mentioned, and I hope I covered that pretty well, worshiping the devil, we don't believe in the devil, so no, and we don't worship anything. When I use the word worship, what I mean is to appreciate, to give credence to give appreciation to make a point to celebrate, to make a point to consider and understand a certain thing, a certain aspect of the human condition, of the human mind, of the human personality. And I think that's a very different thing than actually worshiping a being that we believe to be out there, I don't know, in the sky or something. That's a very different proposition. And so I think that when people ask questions like, do you worship the devil? They're looking at things in a rather myopic way. And of course, as we humans do, they're looking at things through their own lens of experience and of, consideration. They're looking at things in a subjective manner. And again, that's totally normal, but your experience with what a religion is, what a mode of belief is, might be very different than someone else's. And to assume that anybody who believes anything must be based in what you believe or something similar is a bit short-sighted. And I know that, here in America, we're not always raised to appreciate and understand other cultures and other modes of belief. But I think it is really important to note the distinction between paganism and some of the religions that are prevalent out there today, because I genuinely do believe that paganism, although, like I mentioned, should be protected with religious freedom and should be honored as an important mode of belief and an important way for somebody to live their life and, celebrate. And although I think that people should be able to celebrate their Sabbats and Esbats, just as anyone who is religious might celebrate a holiday, I think that it's really important to draw that distinction because it's not a religion. It really isn't. And, I hope that terming it this way helps those who maybe believe that it is a religion to understand that I'm not suggesting that paganism shouldn't be protected. I am suggesting that it should be protected, in fact. And so I'm not trying to say that it's not as important as other modes of belief such as Christianity or Judaism or Islam. I'm just saying that although it's just as important, although it is, it should be honored just as much as other modes of belief, it really isn't technically a religion. And it hasn't been historically. So back in the ancient days, let's say back in ancient Greece, back in ancient Egypt, back in ancient Mesopotamia, folks didn't have the words and certainly didn't have the written words always to describe complicated or esoteric concepts such as, what various personalities the world and what various modes of belief might be, and talking about life and death and things. They didn't have the ability to adequately describe these concepts, so they came up with allegory, right? They came up with the gods and goddesses as representations of the human condition and the various personalities and the various ways of being human, right? And the various things that happen throughout human life. So again, we're not suggesting that there are sky gods and goddesses out there. What we're suggesting is that the gods and goddesses represent concepts that transcend the human condition, that actually rise above language. And, obviously as an author and a writer, I feel like words are important, but not everything can be adequately described with words. And certainly concepts like light and dark, life and death, male, female, anywhere on the spectrum of femininity, masculinity, these things can't be adequately described with words. And so allegory and archetype are really important here and are the very best way to describe these states of being, these portions of the human condition. So I hope that helps you to understand a bit about how paganism differs. As far as, do we sacrifice animals? No, obviously we don't. Back in the ancient times, animals were used as sources of food. I happen to be a vegetarian, usually vegan. And certainly I don't have any need to butcher animals and eat them. I think that's crude, and I think that that's something that isn't necessary nowadays. And I certainly have no interest in killing an animal and ever for any reason that would horrify me. I'm an animal lover. I, have worked with horses, dogs, cats over the years, and I work with some different rescues and shelters, and so actually killing an animal would absolutely horrify me, would gut me, and would just fillet my soul. So no, I don't sacrifice animals. I can't imagine anybody out there who would sacrifice an animal. Although if you want to talk about strange practices and sacrificing animals, visit a butcher shop, talk to them about that. Talk to companies that run slaughterhouses and the meat industry. They literally do sacrifice animals for money. Okay. So, we're not the ones out there sacrificing animals. In fact, most of the pagans I know are vegetarian, if not vegan. Most of us tend to be very socially aware, very politically aware, very socially conscious, and we're not just keyboard warriors or something. We're out there making a difference in the world. For instance, if you're wondering how pagans are involved in your community, I know quite a few local, statewide, and national lawmakers who are pagans, and they tend to be Democrats, independents, and even progressive Republicans. So there are quite a few out there. We aren't always super public about our beliefs because we understand that they're misunderstood and that they can be used as fodder for gossip and other, silliness to attack us, which, religion is often used for. That's a thing that many people use religion, for as a weapon against people who are running for office or people who are, trying to be promoted within their company or what have you. So you can see why people might not be super public about it. I write about it. I've written about it for years, and I've run for office too. And funnily enough, this local chap who, was running for office as well, who is a bit on the imbalanced side, unfortunately. Went ahead and published this whole like diatribe that was a little incoherent and rambly about how he had discovered that I was a pagan. I'm like, if by discovered you mean read what I write like weekly, then okay. So, you know, he had to go about making up all of this false information about me, and, you know, that's fine if that's how you want to spend your time. It certainly doesn't bother me, but I am trying to give folks out there a valid and concrete reason why some of us aren't coming forward like I do. I come forward and I'm pretty much an open book about, you know, what goes on in my life. So I speak and write about it. I know several other people that do, but there are a lot of us out there that kind of just want to be left alone to quietly be pagan. And I think that is one major reason why that there is this idea that people don't understand what it means to be pagan. And a lot of people don't, unfortunately. But, you know, if you feel like paganism has weird beliefs, I've explained it to you. It really doesn't, but look at any religion. You want to talk about weird beliefs? Religion is weird. It's much weirder than paganism. If we're talking about social and cultural norms, yeah, absolutely. It goes against a lot of social and cultural norms. And you should worship however you see fit, you know, not even worrying about whether people think it's, you know, normal or weird. But, you know, if anything, paganism pretty much flows pretty well alongside various cultural and societal norms. It's fairly normal. If any belief system can be said to be normal, of course, paganism really goes hand in hand with psychology, like I mentioned. It's about expressing the most esoteric and the most hard to quantify concepts related to the human condition. Like I mentioned, archetypes are used, allegory is used, myth is used, and it's meant to express lessons and concepts and states of being that are characteristic of the human condition. And it's meant to explain, I guess, that which cannot be explained with words. So I think that that's very beautiful, and I think that it's very eloquent and a very effective method of expressing these esoteric concepts. And so I just want to make sure that people are aware that we're not all out here running around thinking that there are sky gods coming to get us or whatever, that the gods favor us, or the wind blows one way, the gods must be favoring us or something. No, it's pretty much a philosophical, psychological way of explaining various things that happen in life and states of being that exist within the human condition, and tough concepts like life and death, like I said. So that is essentially what paganism is. So no, we don't sacrifice animals. That's horrible. That's just horrific. Nobody does that. Get that out of your heads. We don't worship the devil because we don't believe in the devil. We're not religious. We don't believe in religious iconography. We don't believe in religious idols. We don't believe in religion, itself. Not that we don't respect people who do, of course. Not saying that we disrespect anybody who does believe in that. You do you. You believe what you need to believe. I have the right to swing my fist until it hits your nose, right? Religiously, freedom-wise, life-living-wise, and I'm certainly not going to try to swing my fist and hit your nose. I think we can all coexist peacefully, no matter what our modes of belief might be. As far as how pagans, quote unquote, worship, how we, I really don't know if there's a better, more accurate word to describe, celebrations and sabbats, and I call them sabbats or sabbats. I don't know what's really technically correct, but, I don't know what word would be better to describe the sabbats, the asbats, the celebrations that we, take part in. Okay. And so I do want to tell you a little bit about how we celebrate, how we quote unquote worship. Okay. I'm trying to think of how to encapsulate this in a way that won't take forever to explain. So essentially, like I mentioned, we're all about balance. We're all about celebrating life, death, light, darkness, and the duality of all of these things. And so we celebrate. Okay, I'm going to back that up a little bit. What pagans believe, like I said, because we are all about balance in all things, is that we believe that there's duality in all things. Like I said, that there is light and darkness, there's darkness and light, there's life in death, and there's death in life. And we believe that anything that happens without can be related back to that which is happening within. There's this wonderful quote in paganism. It's kind of a historical quote, and I really quite like it. Part of the quote goes something like this: as above, so below, as without, so within, as the universe, so the soul. So we believe that anything that's going on in the world can be reflected by something that's going on inside of you. Anything that's going on inside of you can be related back to and reflected in what's going on in the world. And in order to honor that concept, and in order to honor and respect nature, which is a really big part of paganism, and really all forms of paganism, we celebrate various Sabbats throughout the wheel of the year. And there are 8 major Sabbats. So I don't want to butcher this quote, but there is this kind of like Wiccan pagan quote that goes something like this: 8 times the major Sabbats mark in the light and in the dark. So we're throughout the year, as the wheel of the year turns, we call it the wheel of the year. So as the wheel of the year turns, we mark the various changes from light to dark to light again. And those Sabbats are as follows: Samhain, which is spelled Samhain, and I believe was butchered in Ghostbusters. It's Samhain. So it's spelled Samhain, but it's pronounced Samhain or Samhain. I pronounce it Samhain. Most people in paganism do pronounce it Samhain. So there's Samhain, which is October 31st. Some people would say it's November 1st, and that's the pagan New Year. That's when the New Year begins. Now, all of these Sabbats are, and were celebrated in ancient times as the harvests and as the time when we would, get ready for the next season, when we would get ready and get everything together that we need to grow our food, to harvest our food. And of course, we believe that the planting of seeds has to do with life and birth and the cycle of rebirth. And, waiting for the plants to grow up has to do with the earth becoming lighter as the year as the year begins and as it moves toward summer, toward the summer solstice. And then after the solstice comes the harvest. And then the earth becomes darker throughout that portion of the year. And we believe that harvest represents, death, which, it does happen. Death is part of life. And so we celebrate these things and we honor these things. And they're very important to us. So the first major Sabbat is Samhain, so October 31st to November 1st. The next is Yule, and that's the winter solstice, so the 19th through the 21st of December. Then there's Imbolc, which is February 1st. Then there's Ostara, which is the 19th through the 22nd of March. Then there's Beltane, which is May 1st, or May Day. And you can see that the dates of these celebrations do correspond with Christian and other religious celebrations. And yes, they were co-opted from paganism and bastardized, but, no disrespect to anybody who believes differently than I do. Historically, what I'm saying is accurate and is represented well in fact and documentation. And as human life progresses and as the world turns, many things change, and many things are bastardized or changed or built upon. So this is one of those things. So after Beltane, which is May 1st, comes Midsummer, or Litha, which is I believe the 19th through the 21st of June. Then comes the first harvest celebration, Lughnasadh, which is the 1st of August, and then Mabon, which is the 19th through the 21st of September. So there are 8 Sabbats: Samhain, Yule, Imbolc, Ostara, Beltane, Litha, Lughnasadh, and Mabon. And those are the major Sabbats that we celebrate. So in addition to the Sabbats, we have what are called Esbats, and essentially those are acknowledgments, celebrations of the various stages of the moon. Now, those are not as important as celebrating Sabbats. They're different. They're just, acknowledgement of how time passes and honoring the passage of time and the repeating cycles throughout life and throughout the world and throughout the universe. And I think it's a very beautiful thing. So the Esbats are the various phases of the moon. Now, we don't celebrate necessarily first, second, third quarter or anything like that, but we definitely celebrate, or at least acknowledge and know when new moon is and full moon. We, a pagan would be hard pressed to not know when the new or full moon is. We do pay attention to when the moon is waxing and when the moon is waning. When the moon is waning, that's a time to consider, look back on your life, look back on recent happenings, learn lessons, consider some of the things that you may want to part with or move away from your life that maybe aren't as important, that you need to kind of cut out of your life. And again, to learn lessons from particularly from failures in your life, which are really great teachers of lessons, I believe. But successes as well. It's a time of reflection. It's a time of paring down. It's a time of, self-understanding, learning about yourself. It's a time of grounding and of really just reflecting on what is true for you in your life and what things serve you and what things no longer serve you. And so pagans do tend to be more self-aware because this is something we are actively considering. And this is something that I think that that's a part of the beauty of paganism, that we part of our belief is to actively consider the self, to actively consider how you're impacting the world around you, to actively consider how the world around you is impacting you, to actively consider your relationships, your finances, your belongings, your life, and to just be very honest with yourself. And I'm very proud of that. I'm very proud to be somebody that does that. Okay. Now, the waxing moon, so from new moon to full moon, is a time of, bounty, of building up, of, bringing new things into our lives, of considering the things that we are looking to work toward in life, of considering the relationships we need to put work into with other people, so without, and within ourselves, within. And these are really important, I think, aspects to living a healthy life. So paganism really lends itself to being a considerate person, living a productive and positive life, and being a proactive person, and being a pragmatic and an honest person, certainly. So, we really mark the need to consider these things in the times that it is most appropriate to consider these things. And the cycle of the moon is very important to paganism. As you know, the moon light is simply reflected from the sun. And I think that really represents the duality that we so enjoy and so celebrate in paganism. That, the dark reflects the light, that the dark needs the light to sustain itself, and that the light reflects itself onto the dark and needs the dark to sustain itself. So sun and moon are represented as male and female figures, respectively. And we believe as pagans that everybody has masculinity and femininity within them, that, certainly gender is a spectrum, that male and female qualities are within all of us, and that differs. The extent to which we have male or female qualities differs between person to person. And we really like to honor that, and we like to honor the various things that make our world what it is, that make us who we are. Okay? And so the Sabbats and the Esbats, or cycles of the moon, help us to really do that. Now, while paganism is a bit hush-hush on the specific things that we do to celebrate, that is not because there are weird, things going on. It's because it's a personal journey, and it's not really something that we want to share with the world. But I will use some examples of things that many people will do. I mean, if you're writing sort of a ritual for yourself to celebrate a Sabbat or an Esbat, you're going to include personal details. So you're not going to share it with the world necessarily. I mean, sometimes people will. If they're writing a group celebration, they'll publish it and just share it. But if you're doing something really highly personal, it's not appropriate to share it. It's not necessary to share it. So some examples of things that a pagan might do to celebrate a Sabbat would be to have a feast, to share food, break bread with other people, to acknowledge the 4 elements and the 4 cardinal directions, and to give thanks to the earth, to Mother Earth, and to the sky and to the universe for the bounty that you are about to receive, and to focus on lessons that need to be learned, on reflections of things that we have learned, of depending on what Sabbat we're celebrating. We might remember people who we've lost. We might look forward to new relationships and celebrate the relationships that we want to put work into, whether they be personal relationships or our relationship with the earth, with the universe. And so we are very socially conscious, and we're very conscious of the impact that we are making on the earth. And, you know, the earth is here to sustain us, and without the earth we can't live. So you'll find that a lot of pagans are really into like composting, recycling, low impact, low or no waste. You know, we're very conscious of these things, and they're really ingrained in our Sabbat celebrations. For an Esbat, it's really going to be a much more personal affair. It's going to be, you know, like writing down on a piece of paper what you're trying to work toward, what you've learned, maybe even asking the universe for protection or for, you know, help working towards something that you want to accomplish. Now, you know, some people may believe that there's a mystical component there. I happen to think that if you're writing down a goal, you're more likely to give more credence to it and work harder to accomplish that goal. And so I think that's how the ancient people looked at things as well, right? So is there anything boogity about paganism? No, not at all. It's very rational. It's very psychologically and philosophically important. And I really feel good about being a pagan, and I feel really good about what that means for me and how that affects the way that I live life and the way that I interact with other people and with the earth. And, you know, I enjoy it. And I really, as somebody who is interested in philosophy and psychology, I really feel like that just fits really well with all of that. Paganism has a really deep historical relationship and a very significant relationship with psychology and with philosophy. Paganism and psychology, like I mentioned, absolutely go hand in hand with the allegory, with the myth. So obviously it goes hand in hand with philosophy there as well, with archetypes. That's, you know, core stuff to psychology. There are some really wonderful sort of founding fathers and progressive thinkers in the field of psychology and philosophy who are pagans and who do things that pagans do and who believe in pagan philosophy. One of those crucial thinkers in psychology is Carl Jung. Yeah, one of the fathers of modern psychology was into pagan philosophy. And Carl Jung is just, I really would urge you to read his work. He definitely had some interesting beliefs. I don't believe in things the exact way that Carl Jung did, but I think that his work is phenomenal and has had a huge positive impact on the field of psychology, as well as on paganism. Another really great psychologist and pagan philosopher is Dr. Jean Shinoda Bolen, who really is into how archetypes present psychologically in people. And I would recommend that you read some of her work too. Those books, the two most famous books she's written, Goddesses in Every Woman and Gods in Every Man, were just life changers for me in college. And, you know, they were required reading for, I believe, a psychology class and a humanities and literature class that I took. So, you know, paganism and philosophy, paganism and history, paganism and psychology, paganism and social consciousness, paganism and progressivism all go hand in hand. And there really are quite a few of us out there. It's not an off the wall, you know, small thing. Like there isn't some small sect of like pagans in Illinois or in the United States or in the world. There are many of us. Chicago happens to be a really kind of pagan-friendly area. Massachusetts, Salem is another pagan-friendly area. Lots of Wiccans out there. And interestingly enough, I actually have a relative who was killed as part of the Salem witch trials. His name was George Jacobs. You can look him up. And although unfortunately the Salem witch trials didn't have anything to do with paganism, Wicca, witchcraft, it really didn't have anything to do with any of that. It still is an interesting connection, and it's really neat, I think, that the pagan community is so strong in the Salem area. So Door County is another really pagan-friendly place. Places that you might not realize are pagan-friendly. LA is a really pagan-friendly place. New Orleans is a really pagan-friendly place. So, is it a small, off-the-wall thing? No. It's very, very prominent. It's very popular, and in fact, many of your religious beliefs have been directly born of paganism, and many of the holidays you celebrate are directly born of paganism. So when you're celebrating Halloween, when you're celebrating Christmas, when you're celebrating Easter, okay, you're celebrating what I'm celebrating. You're celebrating a pagan holiday. When you're having a feast, when you're breaking bread with those you love, you are doing what the ancient pagans did to celebrate the harvest. When you're saying a prayer to give thanks for the food that you're about to receive, you are taking part in a pagan tradition. So in a way, we're all pagan. In a way, we're all pagan. So before you look at somebody and go, ooh, pagan, well, you must worship the devil and sacrifice animals, I just want to let you know that you're part pagan too. Okay, so thanks for listening in, folks, and thank you so much for all of your questions and, all of the colorful and positive and wonderful discussions that we've had about this subject. Thank you so much. Be well and take care.
There's a man going round taking names, and he decides who to free and who to blame. Everybody won't be treated all the same. There'll be a golden ladder reaching down when the man comes around.